Okay, and hello, Canada. We're coming to you live here on Facebook. Welcome to Talk Recovery Radio. I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Darren Gaylor. Hey, Darren.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody. Talk Recovery Radio is a show about addiction and recovery issues. And we're in our seventh season. Congratulations, Darren. 7 years of shows, hundreds of guests, thousands of listeners. And man, we've talked to a lot of different types of folks, a lot of different types of pathways to recovery. It's been exciting, Darren.
It's been awesome.
Yeah, thanks to all of you that have been listening and sharing and commenting and all that other kind of stuff. So we're on Facebook Live. If this is the first time you're tuning in, we air every week on Vancouver Co-op Radio 100.5 FM. And obviously, COVID's going on, so we can't really be in studios with microphones and all that kind of stuff. So the studio's been closed. So if you're listening to us on the radio, you're listening to 1 week's replay. And if you're here on Facebook, you're watching us live. And you can catch all of our past shows at talkrecoveryvancouver.com and talkrecoveryradio.com. And we're on iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, lots of shows. As we said, the show is on Co-op Radio, and which is a member-driven organization, Darren, that we're part of.
Yes, and it's been a radio station for 45 years. So now more than ever, we need your support. And to support the fall fundraiser coming up, October 21st to November 1st, we're looking for donations. So please donate online at www.coopradio.org, or you can mail a check in if that's your fancy.
Yeah. They rely on donations. I mean, they give us our space on air to
right.
talk about something that's hardly spoken about in Canada, unfortunately, and that's recovery. And it's hard to even, like, some people just don't believe us when we say recovery isn't part of Canada's national response to the thousands of people that have died from addiction. And we're going to have a guest on the show in a couple of minutes. We got two guests on the show later on. We're going to be talking about trauma and overcoming trauma with tribal theory, which doesn't use European or Western models to treat trauma. So that's going to be really interesting. A decolonization approach to dealing with trauma. So check that out in the second half of the show. But in a few minutes, we're going to have Member of Parliament Peter Julian join us. And for those of you that do follow our Facebook and all that kind of stuff, you'll know that yesterday, and I'm on the Committee for Recovery Month Canada, we were trying to get a group of volunteers from Halifax to BC. We're trying to get Motion M40 passed in Ottawa, Darren, and listeners, to have September proclaimed officially as Recovery Month Canada. And we posted, it's been shared by hundreds of people, and obviously there's a lot of love and hate. And the Liberal government actually voted no, and all the other parties voted yes. And before Peter gets on, just kind of wanted to give a bit of context on what happened. So I'm the chair of Recovery Day BC, and we got together with other Recovery Day leaders from across Canada, and we started noticing a lot of messaging coming out of the Minister of Health, Patty Hajdu's office, Health Canada, who's a Liberal, that recovery just wasn't part of any of the documents. They created an overdose response plan. There was like 50 pages of safe supply and consumption sites. There was one paragraph about recovery and treatment. And that was a consistent theme and a lot of messaging coming out. And so we're like, hey, there's recovery and there's many pathways. Abstinence supported recovery is one of them. How can we talk to you about this? And we were ignored for like 6-7 years. The previous minister, Jeanette Pipitas, and then the current minister. And so we finally got a response after like so many like emails that were getting worse and worse and worse. And we got invited to Ottawa on March 10th or 11th, like that. We all go there, we all pay our own dime. None of this is work, this is all volunteering. And we show up in Ottawa only to be ghosted. The minister didn't show up. And we went like to this Minister of Health office, and we sat down with them and vented our concerns. And we've got the ability to have thousands of people in recovery participate in your response to the overdose crisis. I mean, Recovery Day BC has 30,000 people attend, and Recovery Day Halifax, and Recovery Day Winnipeg, and we just wanted to offer, like, hey, can you move us from the one paragraph to maybe the front cover too, to the overdose crisis? And we were actually told, and this is by Health Canada, like, this is not bullshit. This was an actual statement. Recovery is not the Liberal mandate to overcome addiction. Recovery is not our mandate. We've been given instructions that only harm reduction is our agenda or in our mandate. And if you want to change that, you need to get parliamentarian support. And, like, besides the fact that that was crazy, there's so much power in that statement, because what they were saying is all of the SUAP grants, they're only harm reduction. All of the policies is how can we reduce harm in Canada. And this isn't against harm reduction, so don't start hating us. This is just about why isn't it and also, and why is recovery only one paragraph in this overdose prevention booklet? And so we were told to leave. And that was it. Like, it was just like, see you. Like, our stories, our existence didn't matter. They felt heartfelt. They're like, we really understand and we really appreciate, all that nonsense. But the reality, they're like, yeah, no, I'm sorry, bye. We can't do anything for you. So Peter Julian, who will be on in a couple of minutes, he was in Ottawa. We said, hey, like, this happened. He had an emergency meeting with us. We all went for dinner. And we sat down and we figured, well, how do we get parliamentarian support? How do we get recovery mentioned more in all this dialogue? And Peter came up with the idea of coming up with a motion, and we all decided to create a committee, and Motion M40 was created. And Motion M40, it's not about money, it's just about simply recognition that recovery is possible, attainable, and sustainable in Canada. That's all we wanted. And yesterday got voted in the House. Conservatives, yes. NDP, yes. Bloc Québécois said yes. Greens overwhelmingly said yes. And the Liberals said no. And because it was a unanimous consent, they killed the motion. And so a lot of comments on social media right now are about, why do you need a month? Oh, that's, great. Another t-shirt, another selfie thing. But, like, what is wrong with everybody here? Like, what, like, people are dying, and we're trying to just have a conversation about recovery to make it okay to say, hey, I'm in recovery. I mean, Darren, you've been to Recovery Day, you've been to our Pride events. That's a picture of our Pride event in the back, clean, sober, and proud. I mean, there's a reason why we connect people and why we celebrate our identities. What do you have got, like, Darren? Like, really, we don't need a recovery month?
I don't, I haven't really, it hasn't really sunk in, because, I mean, part of me just is so ignorant in all aspects of political decisions and reasoning and all of that. So, part of me isn't surprised that there would be a no, because in my head, this is a complete no-brainer. It doesn't cost anything. If politicians need, like, to look good, or and use things that they may not even believe in, but it makes them look, like they care about the people, like, then this would be just that, to support a national recovery month, like you say, for, like, it's no other, there's no other point other than to just recognize a month dedicated to all of the walks that all of the people that are in recovery say helped them and got them, out of addiction, or a little bit better than they were last month, last year, yesterday. I mean, you can't deny that these things are helping people.
Yeah.
So,
And as a person in recovery, Darren, just you yourself, like, yeah, recovery month is in your heart, and Recovery Day is in your heart, and your recovery journey is your journey. but it's kind of cool to actually be recognized. Like, do you not like does like if they like when you realize that they actually said no, like it's kind of like what?
I mean, I would love to see them support advocates of recovery in the same way that they support the results and the stats of harm reduction facilities, because there's only certain areas that harm reduction, like hardcore harm reduction services, work. Like most neighborhoods and communities aren't going to want harm reduction services popping up next to the community swimming pool because of, well, let's face it, what they're there to service and who they're there to service. And so yeah, they're much needed, but what about the communities acknowledging other forms of help and other forms of support for those of us in addiction? Because what I've noticed now, I mean, anybody that sort of like is talking about their neighborhood, I mean, we talk about the hood and the problem areas and the homeless and the dope fiends that steal from us and you know, taxpayers pay for. You know, if our neighbors are, you know, the dope fiends, like, how do we get them out? Like, how do we, you know, we're calling the cops, and it's just like, but then what? Like, at some point, it's just an acknowledgement that, yeah, maybe these people sometimes do act criminally and they need to be, you know, held responsible in that way. But other than that, like, what as a community are we providing for these people in resources that they actually need? And I think the umbrella of recovery is so much more service than jail or you know, a safe injection site. And
The whole concept is the and part. I mean, you've got the Minister of Health, Patty Hajdu, literally front and center on every selfie when it comes to safe supply. She has ignored, and like, I don't know why people just don't get it. She has ignored contact with the recovery community her entire time in office. Like, she's just not connecting with them. So it's just not okay. We were hoping to have Peter online by now because we want to get into our second guest, but unfortunately, he's not online yet. So I'm just sending him a message at the same time. The world of technology here. So hopefully he comes on in a little bit. We're also just going to move on to our second guest. You know, another part of this, and to just, you know, I got to pinch myself to make sure I'm not crazy. So for those of you that don't know, is the substance use addiction program, or that SUAP, is, you know, millions of dollars to fund initiatives to help stop the overdose crisis. Not $1, and I tell you this, like, you can go through all of them. Not $1 was given to any type of recovery-oriented system of care. And it's not like I'm saying they shouldn't have given money to these other places, but all the money went to consumption sites, safe supply initiatives, smoke inhalation rooms, distributions of needles and drug paraphernalia. So all the money went there. And a project that has just gotten so much money has this big project about building bridges between to overcome overdoses in Canada. And it's all drug user organizations. Not one recovery oriented system of care organization is part of it. And you can go to our Facebook page, recoverymonthcanada.com, to take a look at the links. But we've got Peter, who just joined in. So excited about that. So let's unmute Peter. There you go. I think he's unmuted now. Peter, are you there?
Yes, I am, Giuseppe. Good to hear your voice.
Hello, Peter. You're on the air right now with Talk Recovery Radio with my co-host, Mr. Darren Gaylor. And we've just talked a few minutes about, well, maybe 5 minutes now, about the context of why Recovery Month Motion M40 was even created. And so we've given our listeners and viewers that information and the importance of why it's important. But we wanted to talk to you about what the heck happened in Ottawa yesterday.
Well, thanks for asking that. And I want to shout out, because I'm the MP for New Westminster Burnaby, our local recovery houses, Westminster House and The Last Door, that do absolutely amazing work. I'm a big fan of the recovery movement, and in my own family's case, have tragic experience with addiction. So the fact that the recovery movement is gaining speed across the country, we had, I think, 30,000 people out in New Westminster last year. That shows that we need to celebrate recovery and celebrate the supports that are in place for Canadians recovering from addiction. So we crafted the motion, as you know, Giuseppe, you were involved last spring. We had people across the country talking to MPs, got support for MPs from all parties. And so the motion itself seemed to be a no-brainer. MPs from all parties were supporting it. Last week, we gave notice to all parties that we intended to bring it forward with unanimous consent. 4 parties immediately said yes, there was no problem. One party wasn't responding, that was the Liberal Party. And I offered at that point to have the motion be read and passed by a Liberal MP. I said there are a number of Liberal MPs that have said they support this. This is not a partisan issue. Everybody can get behind recovery. So we suggested that a Liberal MP do it, and the Liberals said, well, no, we don't want to have that happen. And when the motion was finally presented, after a week's notice and a week's consideration, 4 parties said a resounding yes, and 1 party said no. And that, unfortunately, kills it for the moment. But we're certainly not going to give up.
No, we're not going to give up. Thank you, Peter. We're going, like, we can't give up. I mean, it's our story. It's our identity. It's almost like this. It's the Pride movement all over again. I'm just watching what's happening on Facebook, and it's like, why do you need a month? And just another reason for photos. We're celebrating an identity of millions of people who have recovered from a disease that's killing thousands of people in Canada. And it's like I don't understand why Minister Patty Hajdu, who's the Minister of Health, wouldn't make this a priority.
It has very important symbolic ramifications, but also very practical ramifications. Having a recovery month that is endorsed by Parliament is something that then sends a signal to government agencies across the country that this is important work. And I've seen myself the joy on the faces of Canadians who've come out in New Westminster for Recovery Day. What an incredible celebration it is. One of the most remarkable that I've seen anywhere in the country, where you have people celebrating the fact that they're recovering from addiction, celebrating sober and free. There's rock music. It rocks. It's terrific. A very happy, supportive, safe atmosphere for everybody. This is something the government should be encouraging, and I can't for the life of me understand why the Liberal Party said no when all other parties were in agreement. And so we're just going to have to, I think, put pressure on Liberal MPs to show them that was unacceptable for them to block this, and that hopefully we can bring it back, even with a Liberal MP reading it. Who cares who gets to read it out? What's important is we need to send a signal to Canadians recovering from addiction across the country that Parliament supports them and Parliament supports the recovery movement.
We're talking with Peter Julian, MP. I was hoping to ask you, Peter, because I'm no politician. I don't know what goes on. I mean, I said the exact same things. I saw it as a no-brainer. But I was hoping to ask you, any theories on, why this wouldn't be something that they could vote on? Would it take away their standing within the harm reduction area? Like, do you have any theories at all?
I just think it was a bad decision. They had a lot of time to think about it, and so obviously it went upstairs, and that's normally the Prime Minister's office, and so what that means is that they're sending a signal that I think is very unhelpful, and it fails to acknowledge a movement that has had such a positive impact on Canada as a whole. Now, we do this by unanimous consent, and we've certainly been doing this through COVID-19. We've passed dozens of pieces of legislation or motions by unanimous consent. And in fact, Parliament this year has been functioning more by unanimous consent, all MPs getting together, than we've had the official votes because of the coronavirus and the fact that we can't get together physically. So we've been passing all kinds of things. This was an important motion, an important signal, an important expression of support for the recovery movement. I can't explain why the Liberals, after a week of consideration, said no. I just don't have any explanation for that kind of behavior.
Well, I guess they just don't play well with others.
Perhaps, but they could have done it. I said let's get a Liberal MP to say it when they hesitated. The other parties had all said yes. They hesitated. I said, get a Liberal MP to step forward, and that doesn't. There's no explanation for that. I mean, the government could have taken credit for it, absolutely, but they refused to do that, and so I am just flabbergasted. But we're not going to give up. We're going to keep fighting because it's important to acknowledge and support this movement that has had such a positive impact on so many Canadians.
Yeah, I mean, being able to say the government recognizes us and supports people in recovery and the recovery journey is pretty powerful. At least it is to me. If it isn't to when you're watching us and listening and you don't think it's a big deal, that's cool. But it is to a lot of us, and that's a picture of a Pride event that that I chair, Clean, Sober, and Proud, and in that environment, why do you need a Pride Day? Why do you need a Pride Month? Like all this nonsense. But you know what? It feels pretty good, being at that event in a sober environment with people that are not using, celebrating our identity, and my goal is that we can do that for Recovery Days forever. We're going to be moving on really quickly here, but I have another question for you, Peter. Lots of comments on social media about, so what are we going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? What can we do about it? So the motion got killed by the Liberals, supported by everybody else. The committee's planning on having a meeting next week, and the committee's made up of volunteers from people from across the country. What are some things that people listening can do?
Well, I think they should be thanking their local NDP MPs, their local Conservative MPs, their local Green MPs, their local Bloc MPs, first off. So I think those MPs all need to be reinforced and have the recovery movement say, look, you did a great thing. We're glad you're supporting this. We're not going to give up. So that is very important. It's important to acknowledge that almost all parties, were working together on this. Secondly, Liberals need to feel some heat. They need to understand that what they did was wrong, and they need to be told that they are held responsible for that. And when they say, "Well, it wasn't me. I wasn't in the House," or "It's not my decision," tell them we expect you to go to bat for us in the recovery movement, and then that allows the possibility of coming back in a few weeks' time, a few months' time. As I said, we crafted the motion together in Ottawa, Giuseppe, but gosh, I don't care who gets the credit. Let's give it to somebody else to read, but let's have it the next time an MP stands up in the House and reads that motion, let's have it pass. And so that's where I think the pressure on the Liberals and the thanks to all the MPs that were supportive helps to create that environment so that we get it through next time. The motion is not lost. It's still there. We just have to get it through next time it's read.
It's a big deal. Thank you, Member of Parliament Peter Julian. He's our MP out here in New West. And we really appreciate all that you do and how you were able to get some unity with at least 4 of the parties in the House. So thank you, Peter, for all that you're doing. And we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to talk to you. Take good care and stay safe.
You will. Thank you. So more about Recovery Month Canada, you can go to recoverymonthcanada.com and lots of information there. Right now, there's a letter to your a member of Parliament that's probably going to have to get changed now that the motion got killed in the House. But we'll have, since I'm on the committee, we'll figure out more information after we have our meeting next week. And like Peter said, you know, the Pride movement didn't get quieter when everyone said no. They got louder. And a word out there to all those Liberal MPs, like the recovery community is going to get louder too. And for the Liberal MPs that actually did support motion M40 with letters and responding to our calls, we want to say thank you to you too. And like Peter said, talk to your colleagues who said no, like MP Kevin Lammermoor in Winnipeg, who was the lead in the nose. But that's all we got for Recovery Month Canada. And you're listening to Co-op Radio 100.5 FM. Talk Recovery Radio, which comes to you every week on Thursdays, noon to 1, powered by New West Recovery, Canada's recovery capital. And we get to talk recovery with awesome people from around the world about the many, many pathways to recovery from mental health issues, addiction, and another topic that is at the root of addiction. Darren, who are we talking recovery with today?
Yes, we get to talk recovery with Barbara Allyn, a thought leader, trauma response professional, and the creator of Tribal Theory, certified trauma therapist, crisis intervention counselor with 25 years experience in active frontline crisis response. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Talk Recovery, Barbara.
Thank you. You make me sound good. That's a good start.
I love it. I love, you know, reading, you know, what is a part of someone's identity, a part of their profession, and seeing so much experience, because it, you know, it obviously brings validity to, you know, any topic we're about to talk about. You're also a speaker, presenter, facilitator, but this is a conversation about a book that's coming out, Tribal Theory: The Genius of Anxiety, Depression, and Trauma. And before we get into that, because yeah, we were sent a couple of pages from the book will be out November 1st.
One hopes.
But a few of the paragraphs resonated with me deeply. So let's just talk a little bit about Tribal Theory.
Okay.
This is something you created. So why was this needed, and how did you come about the Tribal Theory approach?
Okay, so why needed? I would say that quite a few years ago, almost 17 years ago now, because of all my work in frontline trauma, which includes, and frontline crisis, which includes everything from on the street to clinical counseling, to responding to disasters, to responding to shootings at schools, etc., the whole gamut. What was happening was all my work and all my studies and all my training, something wasn't connecting. Something wasn't working. So basically, a young woman came into my office that was covered with marks from cutting. And at that point, I just looked, and after looking at her, and keeping in mind this was almost 20 years ago, so of course there was the tattooing and the piercing and everything else, which is much more common now, but it felt very tribal to me. And I thought, this girl's trying to say something. She's marking it on her skin, she's saying it with her presentation. And so at that point is when I took her into my office, shut the door with a whiteboard, and I drew 3 circles and called it Tribal Theory. And I think what had happened, now I look back on it, is that what was missing for me was that Western psychology is based on behavior. In fact, psychology itself, from the root of its foundation, is based on behavior with no spirit. It actually notes that there's no spirit to be involved in psychology. And that's what I think evoked to me, where I went, hang on, when people deal with crisis and adversity, but especially when they're responding in trauma, that's a spiritual challenge. That is the spiritual entity of what's actually going on. So in my head, with the tribal piece, what started happening is I started saying, hang on, this Western lens actually creates cultural, and this is a strong word, but cultural genocide, pushing it on to the rest of the globe. And I thought, it's no wonder we can't reach people, not only our own folk in the Western lands, but others. And if you're somebody like me who's gone to a lot of trainings in this work, it's rare we talk about the spiritual. Spiritual, again, noting the way you walk in the world, right?
Yeah.
How you connect with the world. So that's, I think, where the birth of it came from, along with all my experiences with everybody you interconnect with all the time, right? I mean,
Yeah.
probably everybody I've ever seen, every first responder who's left his body, every young child who's been sexually abused and had to leave their body, all these things that nobody talks about, because in our culture, they seem weird or odd.
That's true. And some of the most insightful interviews we've had, it seems to come from this, I don't want to say on the fringe type of modality, but not, the westernized modalities that we're so used to. Like, those of us that don't like to use the words disorder, or like the post-traumatic stress disorder, attention deficit disorder. We talk a lot about stigma and words, and right off the bat, it's like you're a wrong person, like you're a disordered person. Is that part of the
Yeah, it's not,
culture?
sorry. Yeah, it's not what's wrong with you, it's what's happened to you. I want you to keep in mind too, historically, we want to look at the foundations of where things come from and the systems of where things come from. We're right in the middle of that globally, right? And the system of the DSM, which I affectionately call the damn stamping machine, the system of that is created.
What did you say? Because I agree. What would you call it?
The damn stamping machine.
Perfect.
So I want you to keep in mind historically, now I'm not going right down to the dates, but the decades around late 50s, early 60s, there was a conversation happening in psychology and healing and trauma that said, do we go this route through DSM and create not even a suicide, pseudoscience, I almost said suicide, in psychology, and start supporting and creating a science, or what looks like a science, to support the ability for insurance companies and people to make money off of mental health? Or do we go the route of formulation? We did not pick formulation. And what formulation says to you is, it's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. So we always need to look at the bias of the foundation of what we're moving into. And that's why terms like disorder, which are created, and in fact, the psychiatric journal will say that there's no support for DSM actually having any real value, but it's become the model. So everybody goes to it.
Yeah.
So with that involved, what we've done is we've created this labeling and left the spirit of what's inside the jar.
People adopt these labels forever, and it's one of those, like, and that creates the fight, because there's been no research on the formulation side of things. There has been no, there's like, I work in a recovery industry, and I work for the idea that one day you won't need to see your psychiatrist anymore because you stopped smoking crystal meth and the psychosis has gone away. That idea, but it's like resistance. But then it's like all the money went to the other side, where it's like, you need these meds for the rest of your life. You need this for the rest of your life. You need a psychiatrist for the rest of your life. You need a psychologist. And it's like, can I just, detox and get okay? Like, the human body wasn't meant to take medication forever. And that's and I'm not saying medication's bad. I'm just saying, I've been working in the environment I work at for a pretty long time, and the amount of medications per patient hasn't gone up. It's like skyrocketed, right? And so the idea that you say it's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened. We have this saying, you know, it's not what's wrong with you, what's right with you. Like, how can we build on your strengths, right? Is that part of the decolonization aspect of your conversation? Because that really stuck out to me. I mean, we have this system in place in North America, and then you come out with a way to deal with trauma, and you know, not using Western or European models. Decolonization is tribal therapy. Um, so, what does that mean?
So if I could quickly speak to your concern around the drugs, etc., I want you to keep in mind, if we are all in fear guard, if we are moved into fear guard by thinking there's something wrong with us, we consume. We consume alcohol, we consume sex, we consume drugs, we consume. If we stay in fear guard and we can't move back to our authentic self with our healthy guard, because we all have a gift of fear, thank goodness, or we'd walk off the bridge, right? Or walk in front of the truck. What happens is, I believe that there is a small percentage of people who are making huge amounts of money by keeping us in fear guard. And that is propaganda and marketing. And if we can propaganda and market people's understanding of who they are and keep them out of their authentic selves, if you can't find the resolution, follow the money. So basically, you've got a bookend of there's something wrong with you, take this. So I'm going to label you as something wrong with you. So you constantly take this. The consumption is ongoing. The challenge is within that consumption, I would say over 50% of our people on the street right now are hard to house, were drug related from 13 to 18. With what we refer to as ADHD, which tribal theory sees as attention directed in a higher dimension.
Wow, that's a pretty good acronym.
And then ADD is attention to double detail. So the whole challenge is, for me, I see all kinds of addictions as actually the spirit trying to get back to the authentic self. So it's not about dying, it's trying to get back to who you are. And you will use whatever chemical or whatever means you can to try to get there. But there's a problem neuroscientifically in the neuroscience of the brain that doesn't let you get there. And that's what tribal theory is about.
Because you make a good point. When you talk to a lot of addicts, their first draw is that safety, comfort, artificial confidence that's being provided with substance. There's more of a confidence in who they are and how they face the world that eventually leads to a real dependency and all the problems that go along with that. But that's interesting that you discussed that. And since we're talking about that on one of the pages that was sent, I'm just going to quote from your book, The Genius of Anxiety, Depression, and Trauma. Our bodies exist to serve us in living. We innately embody protective responses and survival techniques in order to live. Anxiety, depression, and trauma are not mental disorders, mental deficiencies, or diseases. They are not chemical imbalances that mean there is something wrong with us. They are the markings of the genius that is the human body responding to adversity, asking us to examine and integrate our experiences. So your theory, this tribal theory, that statement right there disallows right off the bat, I have anxiety, I have depression as a wrong part of your identity.
Yes, it's your creative genius saying, you haven't witnessed this yet. You're out of place. You're not disordered. You're displaced.
And that we naturally require depression, anxieties as a response, as a self-preservation way of living. So is it being in the Western culture? Is it sort of, like you say, marketing propaganda that allow these anxieties to become a disorder and something I need to help? How do we bring that back? How do we change the mentality that it's okay, that what you're going through is something useful right now.
Yeah, I use tribal theory to do that, but I do want you to just think about, like we're talking about, we have this specific model, and this model we take all over the world and tell the rest of the world to do so. This is a challenge. There's a lot of challenges behind this that have more to do with true mental health. In my world, mental health is a misnomer. It actually isn't mental health, and we'll talk about that in a second, because the whole body responds. So that's not mental health. I remember once talking to a neuroscientist who said the challenge with mental health in the Western lands is that they just stick to the frontal lobe. Right. So here's what's happening. I'll give you just a real quick thought process. If you were to walk into the hospital here, I'm in Vancouver, and walk in, and there was a woman from a different culture who had just found out her husband died, and she starts to wail in the middle of the emergency room. Now here we would get her off to a sideline, off to a quiet room, and I can pretty well guarantee you that Ativan or some other, relaxant, so to speak, is going to be offered.
Yeah.
Okay, we know that that is not a good time to be doing that. But if she was in her other culture where she was able to call out to people who understood, she would be gathered by other women within that emergency room, and they would all wail together. That's just one example of how we deny that. The other thing is, when we look at trauma, again, it's a spiritual, existential, philosophical. It's not psychology, it's philosophy. And so when we look at first responders, which I work with a lot, how they respond is different. The drugs you take, depending on the theory, is different.
I'm beaming off my chair right now, because exactly, like, so the way I'm understanding this is, like, I go to a lot of conferences, and you'll hear somebody doing a talk on trauma and PTSD, or what they're calling now PTSI, and you just feel morbid after. You're like, oh my God, this is horrible. Like, oh, the poor. And then I hear Darren and you talk about PTSD, and it's like, I can see a solution there. Like, okay, like, we can get through this. And it's almost what I've experienced in recovery here is, like, when I came, the first time I came here, I thought addiction, crack, like, I just thought, oh my God, I'm like in this horrible situation. And then I had a bunch of people telling me, hey, it's okay. Like, you can get through this, like, positive, reinforcement, like the solution. Let's not figure out why you smoked it. Let's just figure out how you're going to stop smoking it. And I was like, I don't get that. And I've been gifted. And that's why we do this radio show and positive conversations, because I have no fear in the word addict, because it doesn't have a negative tone in my, like, it just, I don't think of it as a bad thing. It was something that happened, and I have a world of people saying, don't use the word addict, don't use it as a way to, and it's like, but I find love in, like, I find love in my friends. And so what I'm getting from this is, like, the idea that whatever you think is wrong with you, like, trying to, like, figure that out isn't going to solve it. It's like, how can you, like, continue to move forward and with the life you have? So for our listeners, how, like, they have a loved one that's using drugs, and
Right.
they had trauma in their life. How, with your ideas and your philosophies, what are their steps? Because they're going to a psychiatrist and they're getting meds, right? So what do you offer that mom who's got a 17-year-old girl that's got trauma and issues and so forth?
So a few things that are happening here. First of all, I don't believe in post-trauma or pre-trauma, none of it. And I don't see it as a disorder. You either have trauma or you don't, period. I also see addict. When somebody says I'm an addict, what that says to me is I am trying to find my authentic self. I feel like a misfit. I don't know where I fit, and I need help doing that. Not that I need a drug that's going to plug up my ability to look at it. So what I say, and I was a youth clinical counselor for years. There's a few things that are happening here. I also just quickly want to mention OCD. It is another thing that is not a disorder. It's only caring and daring to care. It's magical thinking that people get between about 9 and 13, where you stop believing in the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus, and you start putting it into adulthood thought process. We don't give up on fairies and unicorns because we know they're real. So we move towards that. Within that time period, if somebody's had a crisis happen that they can't respond in a way, and they respond with trauma to it or fear, they start doing magic. And that is what OCD is. It's creating magic. If I tap this many times, nobody's going to die. If I think and perseverate, think over and over again that I might have hurt somebody, then that means I'll be able to stop them from hurting. So again, it is not a disorder. It is this incredible magic wand that we have. So when I look at young people, 17-year-olds supposedly getting addicted, what it tells me is they are not doing what is authentic. So if we look at tribal theory real quickly, if it's okay for me to step into that.
Yes.
And so just think of 3 circles. I'm usually always drawing, so I'll have to do my hand gestures. But if you think of 3 circles, an outer circle, a middle circle, and a circle within that, that is your tribe. The outer circle is the hunter with the gift of ADHD. The very inner circle is the homebody with the gift of ADD. The homebody is a safe place to land in the heart of the community. The hunter is the nature part of the community that goes out, gets enough, and brings it back so the community can sustain itself. That middle is the healthy guard. And that middle circle says, I'm going to protect, the hunter carries it, the homebody carries it. But here's what happens. If you're taken and not allowed to be your authentic self, keeping in mind depression is a symptom of oppression. You don't get depressed unless you're oppressed. So keeping that in mind, if you move to the healthy guard and your hunter moves into a homebody situation and can't get out and is forced to stay there, that healthy guard turns into fear guard. And now our genius wakes up and says, you're in the wrong place. You're in the wrong place. I'm going to throw you some anxiety through neurologically. I'm going to create this sense of oppression by you feeling low and that you don't fit. And if it's traumatic, I'm going to live in your cells until you witness what's wrong with me. And I got news for you. You're not going to witness that trauma through cognitive, because the genius of my body, when you reacted to that trauma, shut that cognitive down and took it all in through sensory and symbols. And our Western lens sits in the frontal lobe with the fragmented information that came in. Well, our cognitive shut down and went, whoa, 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 I can't handle all that. Slow it down. And then the rest of the body, sensory and symbolic. Most other cultures on our planet, outside the Western European lens, use sensory and symbolic to heal. And we've told them, that is weird, that is unacceptable. What do you mean you saw a white buffalo? You're a cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Yeah.
So what I would say is we need to find out through working with this young 17-year-old, where was she displaced? A quick example of that is take a hunter and put them in a homebody classroom. How are they seen? How are they labeled? How are they told what's wrong with them? And so the hunter comes in and they're seen as conduct disorder. They have, they're ADHD. They can't pay attention. Good grief, I'm a hunter. You can't get me to pay attention unless I'm interested. But I can also tell you the squirrel that just ran across there. I can tell you the guy who just pulled up to collect my garbage can. I can tell you who's got the bike over there that I'm worried is that his bike.
It's wonderful to hear this, because when you put it in the perspective of the Western and European world, you look at, because I go on trips and I go to other places and that don't follow Western medicine the way we do, and people are just healthier and happier. Like one of my best friends is from Thailand, and I've been to Thailand quite a bit and got to hang out with like people in Thailand, not touristy places. And it was just like, though, and she got sick and she had to go to the doctors, and it was just a different experience. Like there was conversations. There wasn't like you had to wait in a waiting room for 5 hours to see somebody for 2 minutes. It was like you waited for 2 minutes to see somebody for a long time. It's just different. And
it's also underhanded what we do, to be honest with you. We create assessments that turn out that you're going to have it, so that then the prescription can be given.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm sorry to see it and demonize the system, and I'm not completely. There's a lot of great people out there trying to do the best they can.
I think when it comes to biological health, it's amazing. Sometimes biological health, but when it comes to mental health, we are failing across the country. I have a question for you. We started off the show earlier. I'm part of a movement called Recovery Month Canada. It got killed in the House yesterday. You know,
Sorry.
there's this conversation out there that people just don't think exists, but it really does, where recovery oriented systems of care are pseudoscience, doesn't belong anywhere. You have some leaders saying that opiate addicts need to be on medication for the rest of their life without any possibility of a world without safe supply. How do you, because you're not mainstream, you know, and mainstream there, you know, our ideas aren't mainstream. How do you cope with somebody who's really smart devalues? Well, they devalue, like I get a sense of like, you know, I'm devalued, I'm not taken seriously, I'm that crazy 12-step guy, I'm not for science, I'm anti-science, and it's like, what the, like, what? You know, like, I'm sure maybe you don't, but do you get any of that? And how do you?
Yeah, I do. When I walk, it's one of the reasons I stepped out of the work I was in to be on my own. But I can tell you, I work a lot in Indigenous communities across this country. That's not the response I get.
Yeah.
The response I get is, that's very interesting because my great grandmother told me this.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind that we literally did a cultural genocide to our Indigenous people. We didn't, if you look at Jewish communities, for instance, they were able to keep their symbols, belief systems threaded through the horrific stuff that happened to them. But we didn't do that with our Indigenous communities, especially our residential communities. Now we have some communities throughout our country that weren't impacted by residential, and you can see the difference. Mind you, Haida Gwaii we gave smallpox to, which was really nice of us. But anyway, I say tongue in cheek, of course, it's horrific. But when you're looking at different Indigenous cultures, we came in and we took the kids from Ontario and planted them in Nova Scotia. We took the kids from Nova Scotia and planted them in Ontario. They have no connection to their culture. It did not weave through. Now they're trying to weave it through, but our model says, no, you can't. You bring us your children, we will label them with problems. And then we will give you a prescription for medication. And where I work, good luck getting that medication. Good luck getting fresh water. And we also know trauma starts in the gut. There's neurons in the gut, then to the heart, then to the brain. So yes, I get all kinds. I don't get pushback because I'm invited to go. You know, it's probably a little choosy on my part, right? I don't need the negativity, so I just go where I need to go. Sometimes I get called up on the term tribe, but I see it as social and global. And when I work with first responders, that's definitely a tribe, right?
Well, and you think, you know, instinctively of all of us and you know, first humans, right? When we grew thumbs and, you know, that we can all have some, you know, connection with the word tribe and tribal. But I guess that was always my own personal disconnect was, you know, that I'm a white kid from suburban Port Coquitlam, you know, no religious background. So like culturally speaking, I've never felt that I had that. So does this work benefit someone in my situation, or is it necessary to sort of, you know, from just a generation ago, come from a cultural, tribal sort of, you know, community?
You know, it benefits everybody because everybody's either authentic hunter or homebody if they can't live in that world. So take our kid that's a hunter coming into the classroom. Sally comes in, she's seen by the class as being a problem. Well, she's seen by the system as being a problem. Right. You'll find homebody kids. Johnny will try to help her. No, leave her alone. You could get hurt, right? So the homebody. So what I do in schools is, and just to go back to like how our establishment works. So when I go in schools, the teachers will set up the classroom so the kids identify as hunter homebody. And once they realize they have different roles in the classroom and act differently, they'll say, you know what, it's been raining for the 3 days and Sally's bouncing off the walls. Of course she is. She's a hunter. So what does a homebody do wanting to nurture and create a safe place? They go, what if we put a circle in the middle of the room with masking tape and have Sally run as fast as she can in the middle of the room? And then Sally's doing it, and then the other hunters have circles, and all the homebodies are researching and coming up with new time things to do, and you know how fast they go and how much sweat they're spewing, or whatever the case may be. So what happens there is, if you don't do that, you've got the hunter coming in, you got the homebody going internal with anxiousness, scared of this, and now we set up the perfect framework for calling this kid a bully. But it's not a bully. This kid is coming to try to find a safe place. And because they're not authentic or add trauma, it's not bullying. They're in deep, extreme emotional pain.
We haven't even really talked about, and I don't even see the reason to talk, like the benefit of the, your tribal theory on how to quit addiction, because I've always, known in my heart that it's just a secondary symptom, and all of these these spiritual like modalities are about getting in there to our youth and to the young people, and having this understanding before, because once there is a massive problem, and I mean, you're right, I dropped my son off at kindergarten, and there's another young boy that's just completely frustrated. If he's all by himself and he's acting what people see as crazy, and I just wanted to give him a hug. Yeah. And it just gets me emotional just thinking about it. Because I want to protect my son and this next generation from, well, I don't want him to, not be an addict. Obviously that comes in there, but to get before all of that, and to understand, rather than to just give an ADHD or he's got depression, like he needs to go see a doctor, and just give more hugs, I guess, and have more of a community that doesn't kind of, like, can somebody else take care of this? It's making me uncomfortable type of response. And it saddens me that, like everything you say is exactly what everyone needs, but it just feels sometimes that we're just so far from it and getting further from it.
Yeah, and I can appreciate your again, I don't use the word trigger because it actually triggers the amygdala to go into fear. So I use the term evoke.
Right.
So it was nice to see that evoked in you. I think it is very difficult when you have a community that environmentally is set up to fail. Our schools were built in the 50s and 60s and 70s, built towards manufacturing. Our prisons have no windows that show horizon, which tilts the body off completely. Like we're creating cages for people to psychologically go not well in. So this sense of well-being all being moved towards mental health. Even you will not see me wearing a pink shirt for Bully Day, because I am not going to take kids who are in deep, extreme emotional pain and label them.
Right.
I'm not anti-bully. I'm not about breaking the cycle. I'm about healing the circle. And our Western gets to a point. Keep in mind, as long as they keep us in fear guard, they, sounds a little conspiracy, but you know what I'm saying. As long as they keep us in fear guard, there's a sense of controlling there. And when you get a young person who's walking into school that's four-walled and feels trapped, when really what they want to do is go run in the field and discover. And places like Japan and other places have created these circular schools, platform schools, where they have above an inner circle that's covered with all these coziness, corners. And then the outer is all trees and climbing and all that. And they just interact back and forth. The Japanese also have forest bathing. So you don't try to get a hunter to meditate is like nailing Jello to a tree. Because if you ask us, I identify as a hunter, if you ask us to meditate, you're asking us to shut down our attention directed in a higher dimension. That would put us in danger.
Hmm.
So what we can do is walk through the forest because we know trees talk to people. We also know they intercellular change your body. So there are communities where I am so lucky to get invited to. That's why this is a global framework. So we can put you in what you went through and where you were told you can't be yourself and where you were oppressed, and look at what that looks like. And part of my work is working that with you. And then you have your aha moments where you go, hang on, I did always have a healthy guard, but it went into fear and it came out looking like a maladaptive behavior. But it's actually the genius of my body going, wake up, buddy. You're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be over there. So it's a bit of like how we tell people, you know, the old story of the guy who kept looking for his car keys in the lamplight and didn't look in the dark. I get passionate myself, so thank you for letting me spew there.
It's been great. Your website is
BibleTheoryGlobal.com.
global.com. Books coming out.
The end of the month, we hope. And on that, just so you know, on that website is about a 55-minute video that you can watch. There's no cost, just to get yourself a little connected.
We'll share the video on our replay as well. Really exciting to talk to you. A breath of fresh air. I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy.
No.
We're the crazy ones. I don't know.
No, you're somebody who's looking for your authentic self, and you're saying, can everybody else move out of the way so I can get this done?
Yeah, I hope this movement, you know, like, I hope this theory and this approach becomes a movement. Every time we talk to someone, it's just like, this is what's missing. This is what's needed. Like, and it's frustrating to think why we're not, you know, as a government, as a people, as a nation, you know, more in tune with these aspects. But as long as we keep.
Well, I can say that I've been very, very blessed to be welcomed into the Indigenous communities.
Yeah.
I've been very welcome to be starting to be invited into corrections. Don't like that term either. The people of justice community. So this particular is moving. I think too, everybody takes this and can work with themselves. And that is the key of trauma. If you can't be working at yourself, if you have to do it from the outside, it's not going to work. This is your journey. It's nobody else's. It's nobody else to tell you that a white buffalo means this to me, or seeing this in front of me leave my body as a first responder is my spiritual self saying, I should have saved that person. What did I do wrong?
Thanks for listening, everybody. You're listening to Top Recovery Radio, coming to you live every Thursday, noon to 1 on Vancouver Co-op Radio, powered by New West Recovery, Canada's recovery community, Last Recovery Society in West Minstros. Thanks, Peter Julian, who was on the show earlier, member of Parliament, who's helping us get Recovery Month Canada recognized. And thank you, Barbara, from Tribal Theory Global, who enlightened us. Thank you so much, and hope you like the show. You can replay it. I'll replay all of our shows on SoundCloud, YouTube, and iTunes. Darren, good to see you.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Barbara, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.